Previously on Real Housewives of VRchat.
That's not allowed in this Christian household. Hello everybody, my name is Wes. I'm here with Foodus, Shay, and Slowly Going. I'm gonna get my degree in Sonichu. That's Fimioic! The closet gave him autism, what?
However, my standards have become so low due to the typical kind of person I cover in my videos that, honestly, I'm just glad he's looking for someone older than 18. Even Lolcows used to have standards back then. They should strive to be more like Chris. Oh yeah, don't let me forget to mention that he also emblazoned this sign with some like white version of Sonichu, perhaps to signal how much importance he attributes to the girl being white. This month is also special because that's when Chris makes his debut as a recording artist, dropping his album Christian and the Hedgehog Boys. It's interesting to note that the cover includes Chris alongside Sonic and Sonichu in the foreground, while two black versions of Sonic, at least one of which is supposed to be Shadow the Hedgehog, are in the back, looking upset. The album boasts 8 tracks, all of which consist of Chris reciting parody lyrics over actual songs, not even instrumentals, just full-on songs, ranging anywhere from Backstreet Boys to the Macarena. Seriously, just get a load of So Need a Cute Girl, Chris's rendition of the Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way.
And I never wanna hear I want a boyfriend.
Another track, Best Friends Forever, is subliminally dedicated to the aforementioned Sarah Hammer, who at this point had a boyfriend whom Chris was jealous of. The lyrics are quite interesting. You hang out with your new friends you made and your boyfriend who acts as a black Sonichu. It is your choice to go with them instead of me. Soon you'll realize you're not complete because I'm not there. If it wasn't clear yet, Sonichu, along with pretty much every other character he made up, were either self-inserts or blatant wish fulfillment fantasies for Chris. Because of his utter inability to deal with the problems he was facing in his life, he articulated them through his OC.
Yeah,
after a few months of his sign being posted up without any takers, as you'd expect, it was taken down by the dean of the college, Mary Lee Walsh. Chris had a few words to say about her. That evil witch, Mary Lee Walsh, mocked me and even crumbled my efforts and threw them into my face. It was serious, heart-shattering insults like that which literally shattered my heart to almost nothing and murdered my soul. Like, as if I didn't already understand that love can't be hurried, but they all left a huge impression among the general population that having a sweetheart was illegal in Virginia. Thus, Virginia is for virgins, not lovers. Despite Mary's best efforts, every time she took one of Chris's signs down, he just made more and more of them and posted them up around campus, even creating MySpace and Facebook pages to advertise his pursuit of a boyfriend-free girl. As 2004 began,
a boyfriend-free girl, I find that term hilarious.
Drawings and making comic strips for his Sonichu stories. He also tries to negotiate with Mary Lee over emails, saying, "Mary, I've slept on it and I've realized that note hanging is not the way to get attention. And I don't really want to meet with either you nor Susan. No offense. I'll tell you what, let's forget the meeting. And if you will allow my newsletter to stay in distribution, I will do all of the following. I will never hang notes on the wall again. I'll consider stopping my silent treatment on Susan. I'll consider knocking you and Susan up my scale of respect, each by 2 points. 0 equals no respect, 10 equals respect. By newsletter, Chris means Sonichu's news dash, which he thought would more effectively attract girls by mesmerizing them with his artistic talent. Mary wisely chose to not engage with Chris's shenanigans, opting to just remind him of when his appointment was and leave it at that. At said meeting, despite Chris's Saul Goodman tier bargaining skills, he was forbidden from putting up signs as well as distributing his newsletter, which deeply embittered him, leading him to resent Mary and make her the primary villain of Sonichu's adventures from then on. In one of the diary entries he would post to his no longer existent MySpace account, Chris wrote, "Mary Lee Walsh made it illegal to distribute the news dash. I am very angry at that. In response, I plan to incite the masses and hope they demand the return of the news dash so my chances on getting a girlfriend can be restored. I've also declared war on them as well." About a month later, he added that Mary Lee was trying to get him kicked out of college altogether for his stunts, though it's unknown the degree to which that's true, as Chris is a very unreliable narrator. Since he could no longer attract the ladies in the college campus, he took his sign to the Charlottesville Fashion Square Mall. Though initially seeming more promising than his Love Quest attempt in the college campus, it ran into problems at the mall as well. His diary entries go into detail. "I've just had my worst trip to the mall. I was working with my heart on a red string of fate when from out of the blue, a jerk cop shattered my heart and ripped up the red string. I am very mad and upset because that jerk took my idea for a fall, just like that expletive at PVCC did." Before I read on, I have to make a note here to explain that the red string of fate Chris mentions is referring to a heart made out of paper that he would throw at like girls at the mall, in the hopes they held onto it so that he could reel them in.
Yeah.
If this sounds insane, it's because it is.
Okay.
Anyways, continues. I was not bothering
That
anyone at the mall
hurts.
today while I was
That
trying to
hurts.
sell myself when I got
Alright,
arrested for
he
trying.
was on the
I
hunt.
fortunately did not
That
go to jail,
hurts.
but I've been stripped of my right to go to the mall by myself. I would be required to bring my mom or dad with me. My independence and my soul were practically murdered. This encounter inspired him to create one of his most famous terms, jerk-ops, a portmanteau of jerk and cops. From then on, whenever something bad happened to him, Chris would find a way to blame it on the jerk-cops. He even made a Pokemon card for them, with the description reading, "This copper
That
fiend
hurts.
wants to shatter the virgin's heart, but
That
he's learned his
hurts.
tools for attracting a boyfriend-free woman." Within a week of his arrest, and possibly because of it,
I
Chris
need a
gets suspended from his
boyfriend-free
college,
woman.
saying, "I got suspended from ACC by the board, and I have that meddling expletive to thank for this as well. I am super angry. My dad is bloodthirsty for revenge as well. He's going to write to U.S. President George W. Bush Jr. and Laura Bush to help me get allowed back to PVCC. We all curse death upon Mary Lee Walsh." After this, both his diary entries and his attempts at the love quest died down for the time being, most likely due to his parents telling him to cut back on it to avoid getting in even more trouble. In the meantime, Chris was mandated to consult a psychiatrist for an evaluation as a result of his community college's board. It has a few noteworthy excerpts, such as, according to his parents, there have been a number of incidents which led to his suspension. They feel strongly that the suspension was unwarranted and did not take into account the patient's developmental limitations. One such occurrence was during an interaction with African American classmates. These young women were questioning the patient regarding his search for a girlfriend, at which point he told them they could not be his girlfriend because they were not white. This was perceived as racially insensitive, although from the patient's perspective, he was merely pointing out that they did
My
not meet the
God.
standard criteria for a female companion. To the surprise of
Yeah,
many,
being
the
white.
psychiatrist considered
That's
Chris
so
to be
gross.
with autism in a relatively
Yeah.
healthy way, despite the occasional mischief he got up to.
God.
One interesting point that isn't brought up as a consequence of this document is the fact that both the Love Quest and Sonichu, Chris's two most destructive obsessions by far, only began manifesting after Chris began taking Paxil in 2000. Though I'm no specialist on the matter, some have said that Chris should not have been put on an antidepressant, let alone Paxil, which is the most potent SSRI available. Considering how mild his symptoms were up until that point, it would make a lot more sense for him to just have regular appointments with a psychologist instead of being medicated with no follow-up whatsoever. The psychiatrist that did this particular evaluation, however, was not of this opinion, and instead recommended that his dose of Paxil be increased from 20 milligrams to 30 milligrams daily. I bet that after this, Chris improved by leaps and bounds. Regardless, the rest of 2004 was quiet, with the exception of a video Chris recorded in his bedroom singing a few of his songs, wherein he was wearing the outfit he would become almost exclusively associated with. Along with it, he is donning his esteemed Sonichu medallion, completing the Christian uniform to a T. Unfortunately, despite asking
Anybody want a
his girlfriend,
Sonichu medallion
Chris
for
spends yet
Christmas?
another Christmas as a virgin
Hell
full of
no.
rage. 2005 rolls around, and a few posts began popping up on
I just
Chris's
can't wait to
website,
get
claiming
to
to be hot chicks who have seen him
the
at the
arrest
mall,
video.
but didn't come up to him for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Though few and far between at this point, these were Chris's first
Foreshadowing.
roles, first of exceedingly many. However, one of the
Subtle
people that commented this
foreshadowing.
wasn't joking. An actual girl witnessed what Chris was up to at the mall she worked at and decided to seek his website out. This was quite the event, since up until this moment, Chris never got the time of day from anyone, let alone a girl. Her name was Anna, and in a blog post titled "The Tale of the Crazy Pacer," she writes extensively about her encounter with Chris, saying, "Once upon a time there was a guy who paced in front of Abercrombie and Fitch. He'd come and do it for hours on end, just walking back and forth. He was an okay looking guy, not evil looking like creepy molester dude, so he would pace for his allotted time, then leave. Sometimes as he paced, he would sing or shout. Nobody really could ever tell what he was saying. Oh yeah, and he always wore the same shirt, a nice little long-sleeved red and blue number that had a gold crest on the left side and a white collar and cuffs. Someone, I can't remember who, suggested that the next time he looked in, we wave at him. Whoever suggested it should die, unless it was me, in which case I feel I've received enough punishment. Of course, he looked in and we all waved at him. He looked kind of bewildered and sort of scared at first, but quickly caught on and waved back. So we went about our business, doing floor set and junks, and a little while later he came in. I was kind of apprehensive about this. I mean, I've been doing floor set all day and I didn't really feel up to dealing with another crazy, but he came right up to the counter I was standing behind, and he looks right at me, all fidgety and twitchy, and this conversation ensued. Chris, you look to be about 19 years old, right? I busted out laughing because he guessed it right. That's exactly right. See, I know these things. I can just tell how old someone is, he said, kind of proud and still timid at the same time. My name is Christian, but you can call me Chris. I'm Christian W. Chandler. Oh, hi Chris. So, do angels have names? I found out later that he meant to say, do angels like you have names? Poor guy was so nervous he didn't get it right. Probably, but I don't know. Well, what's your name? Sorry, I don't go for pickup lines, I replied. replied, kind of laughing. His face kind of fell and I felt sorry for him, but he pressed on. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. I was just asking your name. So what is your name? My name is Anna. Okay, well, Anna, is there any way I could get your phone number and maybe I could give you a call sometime? No. Well, do you want my phone number then? You can call me on my cell phone. No thanks. So, do you have a boyfriend, Anna? No, I'm not looking for one though. All right.
Yeah.
Well, do you have access to the internet? Yes. Okay, hold on one second, I'll be right back. I nodded, and he went back to his spot where he kept his 2 tote bags and his Sam's Club cup. So, Christian came back and handed me a card with a crudely drawn Sonic the Hedgehog and some other yellow Sonic-looking creature on it, along with Christian's name, email address, and website.
Yeah.
It was a homemade business card. That's my email address, so you can just email me sometime, okay? Okay. I wasn't intending to email him at all. Despite how awkward these exchanges self-evidently were, you gotta give it up for Chris's autistic riz, even if just a little bit. For a guy with as many setbacks as him, he handled the situation with more dignity than expected.
That definitely looks like a real god.
Even approach a girl.
I mean,
on March 24th, released one of the earliest proper comic
He
book
did
productions,
try. We can give him credit for that. He did try.
Jerkoptastrophe. Despite being called Sonichu Adventure, it's mostly just about Chris himself, retelling the story about being banned from a mall. On March 29th, an update to his love quest is posted to his diary. Well, at the mall today, my heart had an extremely fast recovery. Then it became majorly shattered again. I went to the mall like normal. I picked up some chicken nuggets and a drink. Then I went to my spot. I pulled up a chair to sit and eat my food. Then from out of the blue, this cute girl approached me and she asked me if I was looking for a girlfriend. Her name was Hannah and she was 18 years old. I said yes and we small talked for a bit. Then she invited me over to Starbucks for coffee. After she left, I became very excited and oh my god, all over. After calling mom and eating my nuggets, I lifted the chair with such cheer and grace and spun around with it like a dancer. Then I put it back where it was. I felt that my love quest had finally come to an end. And I so elated that my shattered heart had a full fast recovery. I went to Starbucks and we talked about basic things. I showed her my Sonichu scrapbook. She was very impressed. I gave her my email and both my phone numbers on a Sonichu site card and she gave me her email address. I was very attentive as I took notes about her and maintained eye contact.
Oh my gosh, Pookie
as
sent me her email
I gave
address.
a double take flirt. That was the rise. Now here comes the fall. As I was sitting at my spot thinking about future steps for later dates, Anna and Dana told me that when they talked to Hannah, she told them she was setting me up in a prank. I could not believe it, so I found and asked Hannah. Sadly, it was true. Then in major shock, Anna and Dana told me that when they talked to Hannah, she told them that she was setting me up in a prank. I could not believe it, so I found and asked Hannah. Sadly, it was true. Then in major shock, my heart shattered again by 85%, and I let out a big, no! I got kicked out again, and I'm still without the Fashion Square shopping center that I've grown accustomed to after my whole life. So my love quest has restarted, and as for that date of ours, I'll always remember it, but as far as I'm concerned, it does not count as my first date. I was not as happy as I was today in a long time. I am once again heart-shattered and sad, but I will not give up on my love quest, because there has to be one true boyfriend-free, dateable, non-pranking girl out there somewhere. Poor guy really cannot catch a break.
Why does he keep referring to them as
Chris
that?
finished Sonichu #0, the first proper edition of the comic book series.
He will
the hand-drawn
continue.
premiere issue, as he puts it. The stories in it were mostly reworkings of previous standalone comic strips, complete with nonsensical plots.
He didn't make Sonichu call him daddy.
That Chris Chan later became synonymous with. He also begins drawing new Sonichu releases during his public outings for his love quest, and is even noticed by someone who gives probably one of the best summaries of Chris Chan's essence at this point in their blog post. So Sonichu returns all of them today. I'm not sure what to make of him. He sits in his chair and draws his Sonichu comics. Harmless, I assume. Yet I feel like he knows he's different. He knows that the world rushing in front of him is not his own. Surrounded by the brightest students in America, whatever that means, he sits in his chair and draws, 23 years old. I'm not sure he even graduated high school. In front of him, texts of Plato, Faulkner, God, and Kleist swirl. Does he have the capacity to understand these works? Whether he can or not, I'm not sure. But there is something in his eyes that realizes that there is a level of understanding and thought that he is unable to partake in. As he slumps lower and lower in his chair, with each student he eyes reading or holding a book, he falls into himself, into the markers and colors on the page in front of him. He seems intelligent enough to understand that he does not understand, and that is the hardest part of all. I never thought I'd see Chris be described this poetically in my life. I suppose there's a first time for everything. Amidst these sightings, Chris decides to go to the Mid-Atlantic Anime Convention, where he took a few printed copies of Sonichu #0 and distributed them to whoever would accept. As his love quest sinks to new lows, Chris gets kicked out from the local McDonald's, where he's also been conducting his attraction sign experiments. I'll spare you from hearing the diary entry in its full extent, but the Managerks, Chris's nickname for the managers, started calling the cops on Chris for loitering in their establishment. In later Sonichu episodes, the manager received in-universe stand-ins. One of them was named Married Senor Comic, an alias which is completely unexplainable to anyone with a functioning brain, and for no apparent reason, had robot arms and legs. After Married Senor, Chris's creativity must have run out since the other one was just succinctly referred to as Black Fat Jerk, on account of the fact that, to Chris, that's all he really was. If his diary entry is anything to go by, Chris began explaining his situation to them in song and dance. When one of the managers asked Chris to just have a normal conversation with him, he sat silent for a minute until he came up with possibly the most schizophrenic own ever uttered. I do not speak to any man other than myself, because they have all taken the pretty girls, leaving me with none. What a wordsmith. He followed this up by giving them verbal punishment, the finger, and last but not least, curse ye hame has. What's a curse ye hame ha, you may ask? Well, let's video.
Curse ye hame ha!
A month later, a similar situation played out at Target as the managers called the cops on Chris. He claims that as he was about to give them a prepared speech, 5 cops chased him down, pulled his pants, handcuffed his wrists and legs, and hogtied him. After being briefly taken to county jail, Chris was given a court date for disorderly conduct and trespassing. Later on, he dramatized the situation in a Sonichu comic, as he always did. Fortunately for Chris, after 2 hearings, he was given a $30 fine and had to pay $56 in costs. Within a week of the Target fiasco, he was once again arrested for following too close while driving. And yes, at this point he was a licensed driver, if you can believe it. After his suspension from college, he started regularly interacting with other kids again. Things relaxed a bit for a while as advances were made in the love quest.
God, I would not feel safe on the road.
To Utah, Chris makes a few more attempts at finding a date over MySpace messages, mostly to no avail. The first one was Jelena, who turned him down because he seemed too desperate. Then came Lindsay, who consistently rescheduled her dates over the course of 2 months in order to never actually have to see Chris in real life. Overall, things seemed dire for our brave hero. But it was around this time that he began to rouse online attention, with a thread on a Sega forum centered around Sonichu popping up. Earlier that year, YouTube was created, so the golden age of Chris Chan was at the gates. Meanwhile, he was getting some traction in his emails. Though his application to become an official Nintendo game tester was rejected, Chris got into regular correspondence with a girl named Megan. On the 1st of November, Megan emailed Chris asking him to buy an episode of Tintin on eBay for her. They had already met in person before in a video game convention a year prior, but it wasn't until these emails at the tail end of 2005 that Chris grew obsessed with her. Though she clarified from the get-go that she wasn't interested in Chris, or anyone for that matter, in a romantic way, this didn't deter Chris, who clearly saw her as a love interest and continued to invite her on dates. To date, Megan was probably the person who had been the nicest and most patient with Chris. 2006 marked a significant rise in Chris buying the most random, useless garbage from eBay, from My Little Pony and Sailor Moon paraphernalia to German World War II photos. Apparently, all of these purchases were influenced by
in content. That is such a spread in content.
And for some mysterious reason, Wehrmacht soldiers from World War II. Considering how desperate Chris was to get a girlfriend, it's didn't start LARPing as a Nazi to impress her. Eventually, he got her a Nintendo DS. It turned down due to the fact that she already had one she bought herself. While Chris was busy spinning his wheels into the mud during his love quest by chasing after an uninterested Megan, he managed to graduate from community college, getting a degree in computer-aided drafting and design. Over time, Chris began wearing her down, continually being pushy about wanting to date her despite her repeatedly saying she wasn't interested. Most likely because of this, Megan severely limited the amount of times they met up in real life to once a week, and even then, Chris would take that as an opportunity to be as handsy as possible, which she obviously wasn't okay with. After months of this dynamic going back and forth, Chris overstepped a few boundaries when he started complaining about Megan being friendly with other guys. This was grating for her since not only were they not dating, but she was also not interested in the guys Chris was paranoid about. This caused her to email him in a slightly stricter tone, saying, "I don't want to have to tell you again or I might get really angry, because you know unwanted remarks or advances to a girl is sexual harassment, and I don't take that lightly, okay? So can you understand now? Anyway, sometimes I get the feeling that you copy me to get me to like you. Like Sailor Moon, for example. The only Sailor Moon thing you had was that adult video, and since I told you how much I love it, then you start getting into it. Kind of like My Little Pony. That kind of thing really annoys me. You make it sound like I have to get your approval to be that kind of friendly to someone. And I felt rather disappointed about those remarks. And you already know I don't love you, so why do you make yourself unhappy by holding grudges and trying so hard to win me over? So please, if you really want to make me happy, please let me make my own decisions and figure out my own life, okay? Besides, even if I had a boyfriend, what makes you think I'll stop being friends with you? I'm not that kind of person who'd say, well, I have a boyfriend now, so see ya. No, I'm not that kind of bitchy girl. You know, I haven't talked to this person in a year. I'm not really wanting to get together with him either. Boyfriends aren't for me. Don't want them, don't need them. However, I can't say I like how much you call him a lucky jerk. Why is he a jerk? Why do you call all guys that? Because they take all the pretty girls, leaving you none to choose from? Hate to be blunt, but that's a pathetic way to think. You don't go to a mall and buy a girlfriend. The thing is, guys didn't take all the girls.
Don't do that.
She just
Didn't
kind of
choose
ripped
you.
into
Quit
him.
blaming other men. Personally, I think you shouldn't be so picky about what they look like. All you say is you want a pretty girl. Well, it's the inside that counts. After all, a pretty girl can have the personality of Satan. Meanwhile, an ugly girl may have a heart of gold, but you wouldn't even give a second look, would you? I often wonder, if I was an ugly girl, you wouldn't even come near me, would you? Little did poor Megan know that the powers of the Chaos Emeralds render Chris impervious to reality checks of any nature. While this drama ensued, Chris never stopped cranking out new issues of Sonichu, all containing the same themes recycled over and over again, such as Sonichu's enemies always being conspicuously black, the text bubbles being randomly placed on the
He
page
really
with
doesn't
noticeable
like the
reading
blacks.
order, Chris vicariously defeating his real-life opponents such as Mary Lee and the guy who Sarah Hammer dated instead of him, so on and so forth. What was noticeable in the later episodes was that, progressively, Sonichu became a secondary character in his own comic, with the protagonist becoming Chris himself. Sonichu's function was primarily to serve and protect Chris, and every once in a while symbolically represent who he wanted to be. Additionally, other than real-life people, Chris also added a character called Christian Weston Chandler, a female version of himself that seems to simultaneously fulfill the ideal role of the mom, the ideal daughter, the ideal sister, and the ideal girlfriend. The fact that this guy wasn't regularly seeing a therapist is a travesty, to be honest. As Megan put a healthy distance between herself and Chris, his eBay purchases started drifting towards the salacious. Items include Bootylicious Love Doll, Pearl Beaded Prolong Ring, Nina Hartley Guide to Sex Toys, and his personal favorite, Space Nuts. After years of frustration, Chris began taking matters into his own hands. Following this general theme, he also decided to give up on Santa. Since, for the past 3 years, he was asking for a girlfriend which Santa never delivered. 2007 begins, and Chris begins working on a new project called Yep, I'm on TV, which consists of videos he had recorded on VHS tapes burned onto a DVD. Of course, he had no idea how valuable an archive of his activities would eventually become, and most likely he just did this out of his narcissistic self-obsession with every moment of his life. Later on, the leaking of this DVD was of great assistance to those interested in the CWC lore. But at the very end of this highlight reel about Chris's life, there was one video filmed solely for the purposes of being put into the DVD called Christian Weston Chandler's Future Message.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers.
In this 9-minute long prophetic manifesto, Chris summarizes the lessons he had learned up until this point. He did this because, ideally, he wanted this video to be played in schools. In it, he goes on about why going to school isn't torture, why drinking and smoking are bad, the extreme importance of staying straight, and last but not least, that girls should consider dating uglier guys because they will have a better personality and a brighter future. It's around this time that Chris reconnects with Cole, his previously mentioned half-brother, to offer him a copy of his autobiographical DVD. For the first half of the year, it's business as usual for Chris, who continues to exchange emails with Megan, where she continually complains about him touching her when she doesn't want him to. By June, she leaves for Kentucky, and Chris misses her dearly since she was pretty much the only female he was close to that wasn't his mom. This wasn't the only thing causing him to be upset, though, as by the end of June,
just wait till you see true dirtiness.
Since 1988 had to be put down. He even wrote his dog a eulogy, saying, "When Patty was brought to the vet on that faithful day, I was distraught with fright and concern for her health. I stayed with her during her final moments with my hand on her head and a tear in my eye. When my mother was brought the paper that gave the doctor permission to send her on her way, I didn't want her to be the one to sign it. I raised Patty since she was a 6-week-old pup, and I wanted to take the strain for signing the one-way ticket. It was hard for me, but it was for the best. So I signed that paper with a crying Sonichu face saying, 'We love you, Patty.' After that, I gave her my final pets, hugs, hand to paw hold, eye contact, ear rub, cheek to fur rub, and I sadly waved her for the final time, and I said, 'Goodbye, Patty. I love you.' As I stood outside, I heard Patty's last bark saying, 'I will always love you, Chris. Thank you.' Regardless of how thorny and problematic of an individual Chris Chan is, losing a pet you've had for that long is tough, especially considering how few and far between were his sources of affection. Patty must have meant a lot for him, and it's hard not to feel for the guy. But let's not dwell on this for too long, because Chris did not either. By July, Christian had entered a contest called Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown, which was created to promote the Correct the Rapper game that was coming out that year.
That's
the grand prize was 2 PSPs and an all-expenses-paid trip to Seattle for the 2007 Penny Arcade Expo, info, which Chris was hoping to use in order to seduce Megan out of Kentucky and back into his arms. Well, not quite back since she was never there. Anyway, this is Chris's entry if you were curious.
AP Station, my name is Christian Chandler. I live in Bucksville, Virginia. I have a PSP, I like to rap. I play with the rapper, I go with you now. The only song I know is Master Onion.
July was also a very active month for his eBay.
My favorite song ever.
What a way with words. It's a musical masterpiece.
Mind you, all of these trinkets, gizmos, and gadgets were bought on the credit card of a nearly 80-year-old Bob. Whenever he wasn't getting busy with those, he was emailing every person he'd ever interacted with in his life to vote for his Parappa the Rapper contest entry so that he'd win the prize. He even tried Cole, but to no avail, since he seemed to be interested exclusively in trashing Chris's parents. This technique must have proved effective since his video made it to the final rounds, but in early August, it was made public that the winner of the contest was not Chris, but a guy named Adam Stackhouse. Chris would put in his 2 cents about this unfavorable result. That stupid, no good Adam Stackhouse won the trip. He had music and more than one person in his video, which were in violation of the official rules. 3 other videos out of the remaining 9, Apraluski, Brutal, and Soria Buckwald all violated the official rules as well. Those 7 people of those 4 videos should have been disqualified. Period. I am so angry of the fact that the PlayStation Company and their promotional associates will not do anything to bring these violators to justice. Sworn on my autism, justice will be served to these 7 people Chris overlooked the fact that he himself had made over 120 fake accounts to vote for himself, as he admitted in an email to Megan. Also, his claims that Adam's video had music are based on the facts that Adam beatboxed, which hardly qualifies. In any event, his tirades continued over at his PSN blog. This is directed mostly to Adam Stackhouse, the SOB who was the alphabetically first video in the Parappa contest and got wrongfully the big prize. I loathe Adam and his sister for stealing my one chance at taking my sweet gal friend to Seattle. It would have been terrific. I might have even been able to change her outlook on not planning on having children. She and I are both virgins, although I am a frustrated, high-functionally autistic 25-year-old virgin. I don't have much going on for me, really, because I have been the
that's such a title.
Kick the autistic for my whole life. I curse those 7 people between the cast of the 3 illegal videos to die and burn. As for Adam, if he's reading this and is asking, "You've got something to say to me?" I do. P.S. Fuck you, you dream-smashing son of a bitch. One thing I've neglected to mention is that while Megan was born in Kentucky, she wasn't checking her emails, so she had no idea what kind of garbage Chris was filling her inbox with. When she returned and saw what he had been up to, she once again tried her very best to shut Chris down. I just want to say that your behavior has irritated me for the last time. First, I'll start off with saying that I'm glad you didn't win the contest, because I have no interest in going on a trip alone with someone who can't keep his hands off me. I'm not your girlfriend and I never will be. When I say, don't touch me, that means don't touch me. What may seem friendly to you is sexual harassment to me. You whine that you're just being friendly, but you obviously have no consideration for my feelings. Also, I can't say I like how you use my photo in your video and on the cover of your comic book. I want them removed from the internet immediately. Since I'm not a MySpace member, I can't view what you post. If there are any photos of me on your blog, I want them removed. And I don't like your Megan obsession. I don't like being a character in your comics. I don't like how you made me a character in Soul Calibur and Animal Crossing. That kind of behavior really freaks me out. With all that said, we're down to 2 options. A, we remain friends and only friends, period, as in no more touching me, following me, asking me personal questions, and giving me things. We can still battle and trade cards and talk, or B, never see me again. I'm sorry it's come down to this, but I've told you repeatedly in a nice way to stop, but you've never listened. I hope you will finally take what I just said into serious consideration, and now know that if you try your advances again, I won't be very nice about it. Despite how clear Megan was being, it would once again fall on mostly deaf ears, as Chris would reply with another email titled, "Ouch, my heart," trying his hardest to guilt trip and yakking about his love quest once again, including it with a declaration of his love for her. A couple of weeks go by, and Chris continues sending her love mail, all while purchasing more sex dolls. Eventually, it seems he did take what Megan said to heart and complied with her demands, and she thanks him for it. The peace treaty between them didn't last very long after Chris began expressing his distaste for one of Megan's friends who happened to be gay. After being confronted by Megan about it, Chris replied, "Originally, I was not fond of him because it was obvious that he was a homo. Yes, I am a homophobe. I fear them all, and I fear the tormenting temptations of falling off the straight path. But then I mentally, sometimes from a DVD, and if you'll pardon the expression, shove some pussy in my face. I'll tell you what, if I ever stoop down to changing my path, I might as well would get a gender change operation." What a prophetic statement from Mr. Chandler. By some miracle, Megan is once again tolerant and patient with him, saying she understands why he's like this, and she also had a tough time in high school and felt very lonely. In that same month, a new dimension to the CWC story was revealed, as for the very first time, an online community took note of his existence. On a thread about Eulilia on the website Something Awful, Chris gets brought up, along with his Sonichu comics. Soon, he gets his own dedicated thread titled Sonichu and His Quest for a Boyfriend-Free Girl. After 2 decades of people either pitying or distancing themselves from him due to his eccentric sensibilities, Chris finally finds his niche, a target audience of people who relish in how strange and demented he is. In the thread, people point out how his website looks like a visual rendition of a grand mal seizure. Some even theorize that there was no way everything CWC made was this naturally awful, and that he must have been doing it on purpose as a really elaborate prank or performance art piece. But a handful of the users actually had experienced Chris in person. One user said, "I posted in the other thread, but I've seen this guy in real life. This is no prank. He used to go to the college I attended until he got kicked out. If anyone here is from Charlottesville, Virginia, you may have seen him also. He hangs around the UVA Alderman Library and the Fashion Square Mall. I had seen him around campus and just thought he was in an anime club or something. I never saw him with his signs. I learned a lot more about him when he messaged my sister on MySpace and invited her out for a soda. She declined and he became increasingly more harassive towards her until she blocked him. Yes, he wears that Sonichu necklace around everywhere he goes." People slowly realized that Chris was definitely not your run-of-the-mill internet weirdo. Not only was it evident he was a special kind of, well, special, but no one up until that point had probed the depths of the Quickiverse. Despite how small of a community there was around Chris and Sonichu at the time, it was like stumbling into King Tut's tomb and finding mountains of archaeological artifacts that had been hidden away from the world for centuries. The same user from the previous post found and shared an updated and enhanced version of the attraction sign on Chris's website. This edition included a list of Chris's turnoffs, which are the following: smokers, real drunk alcoholics, gone to Moe's often, current/previous mothers. I support them fully, but I would not feel comfortable walking into a previously made family. I would feel more comfortable starting fresh and having my own children. Real ugly women, currently over 230 pounds, the low functionally mentally handicapped, the seriously physically deformed, autistic, high functional or otherwise. Although I myself am high functionally autistic, but that's besides the point. Medium or dark chocolate, police women. What stands out, firstly, is the amount of hypocrisy in this
sexy
list.
as hell.
Not only does he exclude the ugly, fat, and autistic, all of them being categories many would group him in with, but he says police women are a turnoff when, at this point, he had bought a total of 3 cop-themed blow-up dolls. He also mentions that mothers are a turnoff, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'll save that wretched can of worms for later. In the dark underbelly of the internet, news travels at light speed. And just a little after CWC's debut as a LOLcow in the Something Awful forums, discussions about him sprung up in the cartoon and video game boards on 4chan. Unfortunately, because these were from so long ago that 4chan didn't have the reputation it currently has, and consequently, almost nobody—
On the next episode.
That's disgusting.
It's getting weirder and f***ing weirder.
The warning, it just started. It just started getting weird.
It's gonna get worse.
It's gonna get so much worse. And keep in mind—